If you enjoy what you hear here today, please consider supporting me on my Patreon page. Every dollar helps, and you get to see content that you won't see here. Chapter 5. Getting Settled. Spike was confused, and more than a little bit uncomfortable. The stranger was looking at Twilight Sparkle with something that could either be terror or surprise, or some weird mix of the two, and he couldn't fathom why. He was fine when he walked in. He had looked around, made small talk. He had pretty much been the ideal house guest. But as soon as Twilight walked up from the basement, his entire demeanor changed completely. Now he was standing completely still, his eyes as wide as dinner plates, and occasionally flitting from one side of the room to the other, as though looking for a much-needed escape. From what? Spike hadn't the faintest idea. Twilight Sparkle, on the other hand, was trying over and over again to coax him to introduce himself.
So I was told you're a writer. What do you write? Mystery, science fiction, romance? I guess you could say I'm something of a writer myself, although, my stuff doesn't really get published. I just write essays and research reports on various subjects. It's part of being Princess Celestia's personal student. Yeah, I'm pretty busy with all my studies. Guess that's to be expected, though. Being the student of one of the most powerful ponies in Equestria, right?
Twilight laughed nervously, desperately trying to dispel the awkwardness that was filling the room.
Right.
Spike looked between the two ponies, one suddenly taking a very big interest in her mane, and the other, well, the other one was just being weird. He sighed and walked off to continue his daily reshelving and book organization routine, writing it off as just another thing that he will understand when he's older, as Twilight so very much liked to put it. Saying that Silver Quill's mind was going a mile a minute would be a gross understatement. A light year a minute would have been much more accurate. In but a few short moments, he was vividly remembering his childhood and everything in it that had involved the lavender filly. He was examining her mannerisms and her looks, mentally adding some maturity to them and trying to see if they matched with the mare in front of him. They did, to say the least. After he realized that fate must have been particularly mischievous and that he was in the same room with his childhood crush, he started desperately trying to regain his faculties. In order to do that, he had to smother that incessant voice in his head. Great galloping gazelles! Of all the mares that Luna could have me set up with, she picked her! How did she know? Did she know? Or is this just a coincidence? Who cares? Now I can do what I never could before. I can talk to her and hang out with her and get to know her, and we can share interests and we can talk about her favorite authors and... It took him a while, but he managed to suppress his more emotional side and replace it with a much more preferable quiet and calculating one instead. He shook his head violently in order to clear his mind and cleared his throat. My apologies, I don't know what came over me there. Allow me to properly introduce myself. He took a low bow, bending his right front leg across himself and lowering his head so that it almost touched the floor. It was a bit more than was required in this sort of social situation, but he needed to hide his face from her. He was blushing quite furiously. My name is Silver Quill. It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance. Twilight breathed a very audible sigh of relief, glad that she apparently hadn't agreed to let some mad stallion stay with her for an extended period of time. He seemed normal enough after that, if a little bit eccentric. But, if any pony was capable of socializing with eccentric ponies, it was her. Practice makes perfect, after all. She chuckled lightheartedly at his show of propriety.
Oh, please, there's no need for that. I'm just a librarian, not some noble you need to bow to.
On the contrary, he thought, you're Princess Celestia's one and only student. You're about as noble as can be. I didn't actually say any of that, and instead looked up at her and nodded. All right, I'll remember that, Miss Sparkle. She gave him a funny look.
Wow. Princess Celestia wasn't kidding when she said you had never left Canterlot before now. I can see it all over you.
She tisked, shaking her head with amusement clearly plain on her face.
Well, we're gonna have to fix that.
Silverquill was perplexed. He didn't think there was anything needing to be fixed with him. He was going to say so, but then he remembered his encounter with the bright orange mare Applejack, and how different they were, and it made him think that Twilight might have had a point. And how do you propose we go about fixing me, Miss Sparkle? He asked nervously.
Well, first of all, you can just call me Twilight. No need for that Miss Sparkle stuff. After that, we can just make it up as we go.
She looked at him pointedly, waiting for an answer. He nodded, something he'd been doing an awful lot of lately. All right, I'll do that, Twilight. And likewise, you can just call me Silver if you want. She hummed in her excitement and nodded vigorously, a broad smile bursting forth, making her face positively glow with joy.
Great! This is gonna be so much fun! I've never had a friend stay over for more than a day or two, and especially not one who had similar interests as me. To be honest, I'm a little nervous about it.
She giggled shyly and rubbed her two front hooves together. Ah! Spike blurted out from his position on top of the ladder near the bookshelves. If you were just a little nervous, then I'm a cuddly little bunny rabbit. Twilight shot him a look that quite clearly said, if a certain dragon doesn't shut up, he's going to be working overtime. He chuckled and turned back to his work. Silverquill raised an eyebrow and looked at Twilight questioningly, trying to ignore how cute she looked when she was nervous, lest he lose control of his mind again. She brightened and looked out the window.
How about we go for a walk, and I'll tell you. I have some errands to run, and I could use the company.
He was surprised. He was expecting to immediately put down his bags and start relaxing with a good book. But he reasoned it was a gorgeous day outside, and he wanted to see the rest of the town. No sense in staying inside right now. All right, that'd be nice. What should I do with my stuff? He motioned to his saddlebags.
Oh, we have your room all set up already, so you can put them there. Follow me, I'll show you.
She motioned with her hoof and started walking up the stairs to the second floor. She opened the door on the farthest end of the hallway and stepped in. Silverquill poked his head around the doorway and looked around. His room looked like most of the other rooms in the house, with walls and floors made up of polished wood. It was simply and sparsely furnished with a bed, a dresser, a full-length mirror, and a desk with a lamp on it. It was impeccably clean. Twilight looked at him anxiously as he examined the room. She seemed to be nervous that he wouldn't like it, and if he were any other high-class Canterlot pony, he probably wouldn't. Good thing he wasn't like any other Canterlot pony. It's lovely, Twilight. Thank you. She smiled, pleased that he liked his room. He walked to his desk and put down his saddlebag, and as he did so, he realized that there was something odd about the lamp resting on it. A gem lamp? Aren't those really expensive? Why not use a normal kerosene lamp? Gem lamps were different than normal flame lamps or candles, in that the light was supplied by magically altered gems. The gems were made to absorb sunlight, store it, then release it later at the flick of a switch. They were much more expensive due to the materials and spellwork needed to make them. Twilight shook her head.
Oh, I can't use anything that uses flame. The entire library, what with being inside a tree and storing hundreds of books, would go up in flames pretty much instantly with one stray spark. Besides, all the gem lights in here were provided by Princess Celestia.
He slowly nodded his understanding. Ah, of course. That makes sense. He took a look at himself in the mirror and fixed up his slightly disheveled mane a little bit. This morning, when he woke up earlier than he normally would, his fatigue had been visible throughout his entire body. Now, though, after catching up on his sleep with that nap on the train, he felt like he could run a marathon with enough energy left over to build himself his own house, if he wanted to. He turned around to face Twilight. Okay, I'm ready to go when you are.
Great, because I'm ready to go right now.
Silverquill followed her out of his room, down the stairs, and out the front door. Twilight called out to Spike, who was in the basement performing his assistant duties, telling him that she was going out for a while. He and Twilight made their way down the main road of Ponyville, heading to the town square where most of the various shops were located. While they walked, they chatted lightly, mainly about themselves.
So, Silver, tell me about yourself. What do you do in your free time? Any hobbies?
Twilight asked. To be honest, the only thing I really like to do for fun is read, mainly sci-fi or fantasy type fiction like Wise Mare's Fear or Aragon. Twilight raised her eyebrows at this.
Really? I never would have pegged you as somebody who was interested in fantasy.
He grinned. You thought I would only read the older classic stories? Spend my nights reading Shakespearean plays or poring over the philosophical works of Plato? Twilight's cheeks reddened slightly.
Kinda. You just seem like the type. Sorry about that.
Silverquill waved a hoof, dismissing her apology as unnecessary. Nah, don't worry. I know what kind of picture I paint with my demeanor. And while I do enjoy the older works every now and then, my true love lies with fantasy. That's why I became a fantasy writer in the first place. Twilight became visibly excited, remembering that Princess Celestia mentioned that Silverquill was a writer by trade.
That's right, you're a writer. Have you managed to get anything published?
Have you ever heard of the Forest Rose series? I wrote that under the pseudonym Sharpquill. Her surprised expression told Silverquill that she had heard of it.
Oh my goodness, you wrote Thorn and Thistle and the Blue Rose? Wow, not only are you a writer, but you're a good one.
Silver smiled modestly, nodding his thanks for her compliment. Oh, I still have a long way to go with my writing, but thanks. To be honest, the reason that I came to Ponyville in the first place was because I was having difficulty with writing the third book in the series, The Flower of the Ages. So I came here to give my mind some time to rest and relax. Twilight nodded wisely.
Writer's block, huh? I'm no stranger to that. But you were right to come here. Rest and relaxation is the best way to unblock the river of creativity, that's for sure.
Silverquill looked at her curiously. My. Hear what I hear and see what I see. Methinks that I am in the company of a fellow wordsmith. Twilight burst out laughing at his ridiculousness.
I wouldn't go so far as to say that I'm a wordsmith, as you so eloquently put it. But my lifestyle does involve a good amount of writing.
When Silverquill raised his eyebrows, she explained further.
Anyway, I was sent to Ponyville by Princess Celestia to study friendship. Every time I learn something new, I write a letter to her explaining it. Even with my assistant Spike helping me with my work, that and all my other studies of magic and other subjects, they keep me pretty occupied.
A distant memory of her when she was a filly and her extraordinary show of magical talent during the entrance exam to Princess Celestia's School for Gifted Unicorns surfaced in the back of his mind. The lavender filly had become Princess Celestia's own student, and Silverquill hadn't seen her again. He mentally kicked himself for not realizing sooner that the lavender filly back then and Princess Celestia's student now were the same pony. In retrospect, he must have been fairly thick to not have realized it sooner. Silverquill was apparently making these feelings known through his facial expression, at least enough for Twilight to notice.
Are you alright?
She asked with a touch of concern in her voice. Broken out of his reverie, he nodded reassuringly at her. Yeah, fine. Sorry about that. Kinda spaced out there for a second. Something I seem to be doing a lot of today for some reason.
Oh,
She said simply. They walked in silence for a few moments, Twilight greeting a few ponies she knew, and Silverquill looking around and taking in the sights. After a while, he turned back to her and asked, "So, where are we going?"
I'm a little short on writing supplies, so I'm going to Quills and Sofas to pick up some more.
She replied. "There's actually a shop called Quills and Sofas?" he asked disbelievingly. Twilight nodded, amused at his reaction. "I'm gonna have to see this for myself." Twilight laughed and nodded, agreeing at the absurdity of it.
What can I say? Ponyville attracts all kinds of eccentrics.
Silver nodded as he watched a gray male Pegasus with a yellow mane and eyes that pointed in different directions fly straight into the tree next to a mailbox in front of a house, sending the letters in her saddlebag flying out around her. She picked herself up, looked at the scattered letters on the ground, and face-hugged. "It certainly seems so," Silver said. Twilight abruptly stopped walking a little while after that.
All right, here we are. Quills and Sofas, the most specific shop in all of Equestria.
And indeed it was. True to its name, it only sold 2 things, but from what he could tell, they were both of the highest quality. He could see why Twilight decided to come here. He bought a few nice quills while he was there himself, just in case. Once they finished their business, they made their way outside into the town square. All around them, there were shops and stalls selling a variety of goods, ranging from candies to clothing. The air was filled with the sound of ponies yelling to potential customers and promoting their goods, and the roads were packed with ponies going about their business. It reminded Silverquill of the hustle and bustle of the average Canterlot street, voices clamoring for attention and ponies jostling every pony around. After Twilight had bought a few more things from the stalls and shops, they made their way out of the town square and sat down on a bench on the side of the road. "Well, what should we do now?" asked Silverquill. "I know hardly anything about this town, so it's your decision." Twilight tapped her chin with her hoof, thinking. She perked up as an idea came to her.
How about we go and get something to eat? There's this lovely place not far from here that has the best cupcakes on this side of Equestria. Plus, you'll be able to meet my good friend who works there.
"Sounds good to me," he replied. And after a 5-minute walk, sure enough, they arrived at a small but very attractive bakery. It was extremely stylized, with pink walls and bright, colorful designs that naturally drew the eye. It was designed to look like an oversized gingerbread house, Silver realized with some amusement. The sign on the front said Sugar Cube Corner in bright yellow letters. They entered, a small bell over the door signaling their arrival. The interior was just as pretty as the exterior. Not only were the owners successful, but they had great taste in decor. Twilight walked up to the front counter and looked around. There was nobody behind the counter, so she just waited. Silverquill walked up next to her, examining the pastries in the display case. Well, if they tasted as good as they looked, then Silverquill would have to believe Twilight's earlier comment about them being the best cupcakes on this side of Equestria. A loud bang came from the kitchens, startling Silverquill. Twilight, however, only nodded knowingly, as though she expected something of the sort to happen.
Pinkie, you here?
Twilight called after a few moments of waiting.
Just a minute!
Came a sing-song voice from the kitchens behind the counter. Soon after, an absurdly bright pink pony with a poofy, cloud-like mane, which was also pink, hopped out. She was wearing a chef hat that seemed to be twice as big as her head, and her face was covered in flour.
Sorry for the wait, every pony. I was trying to make the biggest cake possible by completely filling the oven with dough. Although I accidentally forgot that dough expands. Long story short, we need a new oven. Oh, hey, Twilight, didn't notice you there.
Twilight smiled at her friend.
Hey, Pinkie, how's it going?
Twilight's bubbly friend, as that's the best word Silver could come up with to describe her, bounced up and down in excitement.
Well, Twilight, it's a beautiful day. Ponies are smiling, laughing all across Ponyville, and I'm doing one of the most fun things in the entire world, baking!
Twilight giggled, her friend's infectious laughter affecting her.
Wow, Pinkie, you love baking that much?
Pinkie laughed as though Twilight asked the most ridiculous question in the world.
Of course I do, silly filly. Baking is one of the most awesomest things in the world. It's like science for hungry ponies.
Twilight chuckled, and even Silverquill cracked a small smile. Only then did Pinkie notice him, and her head cocked to one side curiously.
Oh, right, Pinkie. I'd like you to meet my newest friend, Silverquill. Silverquill, this is my good friend Pinkie Pie.
It's a pleasure to meet you, Silverquill said politely. Pinkie Pie still stared at him, looking way more confused than she needed to be.
That's funny. I don't remember seeing you around before, and I know every pony in Ponyville.
Well, that's probably because I just arrived at Ponyville today from Silverquill stopped talking at Twilight's frantic hoof gestures. She was jerking her hoof across her neck with a pained expression on her face, the universal signal for, shut the buck up! But it was too late. The damage had been done. Pinkie Pie gasped as though she was trying to suck in all of the air in the shop in one breath, and her eyes widened so much they almost became too big for their sockets. Silverquill said nervously. Pinkie Pie was holding her breath, trying to hold back an outburst of what he hoped was just profound excitement. Perhaps too much excitement, as it started to build up inside her, inflating her like a balloon and lifting her off the floor. Once the excitement pressure became too much for Pinkie Pie to bear, she exploded in a loud pop with multicolored streamers flying out in every direction where she used to be standing, accompanied by the sound of a kazoo. After 10 seconds of silence, exasperated for Twilight and terrified for Silver, he finally spoke. Did I just kill a pony? Twilight sighed next to him.
No, don't worry. She's just being Pinkie Pie. Don't ask how.
By the way she said it, Silverquill suspected that she's just being Pinkie Pie wasn't an uncommon way to explain her actions. They turned to the sound of hoofsteps coming down from the floor above them. A portly, light blue pony was descending the steps and smiled at them.
Why, hello there, Twilight. How nice to see you again. Likewise, Mrs. Cake.
She replied with a nod. Mrs. Cake looked around the shop.
Huh. Where's Pinkie Pie? She exploded.
Twilight explained without batting an eye.
Ah, I see.
Mrs. Cake seemed to be just as used to Pinkie Pie's laws of physics breaking antics as Twilight.
So, what can I get you two? 2 cupcakes, please. Right away, dearie.
Twilight and Silverquill sat down with their cupcakes and began chatting. They talked about their lives in Ponyville and Canterlot. They talked about their favorite books and authors. And they talked about their relationship with the princesses. And they talked about whatever else came to their mind. As they sat there, Silverquill found himself focusing less and less on their conversation and more on Twilight herself. His mouth was running on autopilot, while his brain was absorbing every detail about her. The way she delicately tapped at her mouth with a napkin, the way her mane shifted when she moved, every single aspect of her mannerisms he could find. I need to remember to thank Luna again for this idea, he thought to himself.